Hey, traveler, come closer. The fire is kind tonight, and the night air smells of rain and rosemary. Set your burdens down. Tonight, I'll tell you of two souls who once lived beneath the vaulted shadows of medieval France, where parchment, prayer, and passion were the languages of life. This is not legend. Their names were Heloise and Abelard, a scholar and his student, a philosopher and a noblewoman, whose love, forbidden and fragile, bloomed quietly in a world ruled by silence. I was no more than a humble servant in the house of Canon Fulbert, Heloise's uncle. The man loved knowledge as much as he loved status, and so, when a great scholar named Peter Abelard arrived in Paris, he invited him to live and teach under our roof. Abelard was known across Christendom for his mind, clever, proud, and too bold for the comfort of the church. When he came to us, he brought with him not wealth or rank, but something rarer, words that stirred the soul. Heloise was unlike other noblewomen. She read Latin, studied philosophy, and asked questions most men feared to speak aloud. When Abelard taught, her gaze never left him, and when she spoke, his eyes softened in a way that words could not hide. I saw it begin, that quiet fire. It began not in glances or touches, but in letters, ink, and parchment, carrying what tongues could not risk. Their love grew in the still hours of study, when candlelight trembled on manuscripts, and the world beyond the library fell away. Sometimes I would bring them ink or fresh quills. I was only meant to serve, yet even then I could feel it, that fragile current between them. Their voices lowered when others entered. Their silences spoke more than any words. In the great hall, she would sit across from him during supper, her head bowed, his eyes fixed on the table. But when I passed between them, I would sometimes see a faint smile flicker in the corner of her mouth, quick as a candle flame before it dies. Their secret meetings were not born of passion alone, but of kinship, two minds that found peace in each other's company. In a world where women were told to obey, Heloise dared to think. And in a world where men were told to rule, Abelard dared to feel. One evening, when Paris slept and the bells tolled softly over the Seine, I heard faint voices from the old garden. The air smelled of ivy and rain. There they stood, she with her cloak drawn close, and he with parchment in his hand, trembling slightly in the wind. "If love is sin," she whispered, "then we are saints of the truest kind. Then may heaven forgive us," he said softly, "for I have worshipped none but you." It wasn't a grand confession, no cries, no drama. Just two souls meeting where silence could not reach them. Their secret could not last forever, of course. The church and her uncle soon learned what the walls had long known. What followed was sorrow, separation, and vows neither of them truly chose. But that is for another night. Tonight, I want you to remember them not for their grief, but for their courage, for the way they dared to love in a world that taught them to fear it. And even now, when I walk the cloisters where they once walked, I swear I can still feel it, the echo of footsteps, the warmth of two hearts that defied the cold. The stones remember, traveler. They always do. Welcome back, traveler. The fire still burns low, and outside the rain has softened into mist. The castle sleeps, but the story continues, the kind that does not end with silence, but lingers gently, even when voices fade. When I last spoke to you, Heloise and Abelard had found each other, two minds meeting in secret, their love hidden in candlelight and parchment. But the world, as it often does not take kindly to what it does not understand. The letters began after their parting. After vows were taken, not out of joy, but out of necessity, a cruel peace meant to calm the storm their love had caused. She was sent to a convent where the bells marked every hour and the scent of incense replaced the fragrance of roses. He withdrew to a monastery, far from the city, his pen now his only companion. I remember the day the first letter came. A monk, gray and solemn, handed me a folded parchment sealed with wax. "Deliver this," he said, "to the sister at the Paraclete Abbey." And so I did, not knowing that I carried the beginning of what would become one of the most beautiful correspondences in all of Christendom. Her letters were not merely words. They were the sound of a heart refusing to be silenced. She wrote not as a nun, but as a woman still very much alive, still burning with memory. "You once formed my world," she wrote, "and though the veil covers me now, my soul still turns toward you as flowers turn to the sun." Abelard's replies were gentler, yet weighed with guilt. He spoke of faith, of reason, of trying to make peace with the past. And yet, between every line, one could feel what he could not confess outright, that no amount of prayer could erase the echo of her name. Sometimes I would bring her these letters myself, disguised as deliveries for the abbess. She would thank me softly, and once, only once, when she believed no one was watching, I saw her press the parchment to her heart and close her eyes. The wind moved through the chapel windows then, carrying with it a sound like a sigh. I remember thinking, even heaven must have heard her longing. Their words traveled across years. No longer lovers, they had become something deeper, souls tied not by touch, but by remembrance. Each letter was a bridge between two cloisters, two lonely hearts bound by silence, yet still speaking across the miles. "To forget," she once wrote, "would be to unmake myself. I am the echo of our past, and I will not fall quiet." In his final letters, Abelard wrote of peace, not of the heart, but of the soul. He told her that perhaps their love, denied on earth, might find its rest in eternity. "Our names," he said, "may fade in the world of men, but not in the heart of God. What we were in truth, not sin, but devotion misnamed. The years passed. The world changed. Kings rose and fell, wars came and went, yet their letters survived, passed from hand to hand, hidden in monasteries, copied in candlelight. And through them, their love still speaks, quiet, steadfast, eternal. Sometimes, when I walk near the ruins of Paraclete Abbey, I imagine her there, Holloway's, older now, still reading his words by the glow of a single candle. And in the stillness, I hear the faint scratch of her quill, answering him once more. Theirs was not the love of stories told for glory or gold. It was the kind of love that teaches that even in loss, beauty can live. That even when silence falls, words can keep the heart awake. So rest now, traveler. For tonight, you've listened to a love that crossed centuries, carried not by touch, but by ink and faith. The letters still exist, and so, in a way, so do they. Traveler, the night has deepened, and the fire has grown small, its light now soft and steady like a heartbeat. Rest your mind and listen, for this chapter brings us to the quiet years, the ones where love no longer burns bright, but glows gently, like embers that refuse to fade. After the letters ceased, life carried them to different corners of the world. Abelard, weary of the world's judgment, built a small monastery far from Paris. He called it the Paraclete, a name meaning comfort, refuge. In time, Heloise came to live there as abbess, leading a community of devoted women. By then, their hands no longer reached for one another, yet their hearts remained bound by something greater than touch. They wrote still, from time to time, not as lovers, but as two souls who had grown into understanding. Their words were no longer cries of longing, but reflections born of peace. Where once their love defied the church, it now rested within faith, finding a quiet holiness of its own. I remember visiting the Paraclete in those later years. The air smelled of lavender and parchment. Heloise walked the cloisters with calm dignity, her veil brushing against the carved stone as sunlight followed her steps. There was serenity in her eyes, a beauty that time had deepened, not dulled. One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, she stood by the garden well. She looked up at the sky, pink fading to silver, and said softly to me, "Do you think he still prays for me?" I told her I believed he did. But in truth, I think they prayed for each other every day, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. Years passed quietly. Abelard's health began to fail. His life had been hard, his body worn by both study and sorrow. He wrote to Heloise one last time, asking for her prayers and her forgiveness. When news reached her of his passing, the bells of the Paraclete tolled slow and low, their sound like a sigh through the valley. She did not weep before others. Instead, she went to the chapel alone, where the candles flickered against the old stone altar. I followed at a distance and saw her kneel. For a long time, she said nothing, only rested her hand upon a single letter, the parchment worn thin with age. Later, when Abelard's remains were brought to the Paraclete, Heloise herself oversaw their burial. She chose a place near the chapel garden, where wild roses grew. There, beneath the soft French sky, they laid him to rest. It is said that when Heloise passed many years later, she was buried beside him. And when her coffin was opened to lay her there, his arms, long stilled in death, were found open, as if waiting to receive her. Whether that tale is truth or blessing, I cannot say, but I like to believe it. Because love like theirs does not die. It simply changes form, from passion to peace, from longing to light. Even now, if you travel to France and find your way to Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, you can see their tomb. Two figures carved in stone, lying side by side, faces turned toward one another. Around them, ivy climbs, and the world moves quietly on. Each year, visitors leave flowers there, not out of pity, but reverence. For theirs was not a story of tragedy, but of endurance. They loved, they lost, and they found meaning in both. So if ever you feel that time has taken something precious from you, remember them. Two souls who learned that love's truest shape is not always found in touch, but in memory and in faith. The night is still now, and the fire has burned low. Rest, traveler. Their story has ended, but its echo remains. In every whispered vow, every page turned by candlelight, and every heart brave enough to love quietly, even when the world says not to. And if you listen closely, you might hear it too. The sound of the old stones breathing softly, remembering. The night deepens, and the fire burns low. If your eyes are still open, traveler, stay a little longer. The story moves now from France to England, where the rain falls softer, and the castles rise from mist like half-remembered dreams. Let me tell you of a love that began not in luxury, but in loss. Of a widowed lady who dared to stand before a king. Her name was Elizabeth Woodville. Her beauty was quiet, the kind that lived more in her eyes than in her gown. She had known sorrow early, her husband slain in the Wars of the Roses, her children left without inheritance, her home taken by the chaos of shifting crowns. It was said she waited by a great oak tree one morning, holding her son's petitions in trembling hands, as the king's procession passed along the road. Edward IV, young and newly crowned, was no stranger to power, tall, golden, victorious. But when he saw her standing there, grief and grace bound in one breath, he stopped. I remembered the silence that fell. Even the wind seemed to still as he dismounted, coming closer until their shadows met beneath the branches. "Rise, lady," he said softly. "No mother should kneel for justice." From that moment, something unseen began to take root. In days that followed, the king found reasons to visit her home again, to bring news, to hear her speak. She never sought his favor, yet her presence drew him like a prayer he could not name. At court, they spoke of alliances, of treaties and dowries. But Edward's heart wandered beyond the marble halls, to that small manor where the widowed Elizabeth lived with quiet dignity. And one evening, when the sun fell low over the meadows, he went to her in secret. No banners, no guards. Only the sound of horses fading into the woods, and the faint rustle of her gown as she opened the door. What passed between them was not sudden passion, but recognition, a gentleness that asked for nothing and gave everything. When he took her hand, he did not speak of thrones or crowns. He only said, "If I must rule a kingdom, let it begin here, in your eyes." Their marriage was kept secret, hidden from the great lords and foreign courts who had planned his royal match elsewhere. I was among the few who knew. I remember the chapel that night, small, candlelit, with the scent of lily and wax thick in the air. She wore no jewels. He wore no crown. Only their vows, spoken softly, enough to echo forever in the stone. When the truth reached the court, anger rippled through the kingdom. How could a king, they said, choose love over power? But Edward only smiled and answered, "Power fades with time. Love does not." Elizabeth was crowned queen, though not all bowed willingly. And yet she carried her crown with calm grace, her gaze steady, her silence unshaken. They faced storms together, betrayal, rebellion, war. But through each trial, he returned to her side, and when laughter filled the court, it was her smile he sought in the crowd. Years later, when he fell ill and the shadow of death came too soon, she stayed beside him until his final breath. The same courage she had shown beneath the oak tree never left her. After his passing, the wars would rise again, and her heart would bear much sorrow, but she never let bitterness claim her soul. For once, long ago, she had stood before a king as a mother seeking justice, and left as a queen chosen by love. And that, traveler, is how history bends, not only by swords, but by quiet hearts that dare to change it. So now, as the fire sighs and the night turns silver beyond the window, remember them. A king and a widow, not bound by duty, but by devotion. Their story lingers still in the English mists, where every rustling oak leaf sounds a little like a vow. Sleep now. For love, even when whispered in secret, is never truly lost. If sleep still hasn't found you yet, then stay a little longer. The night is deep, but the fire still glows, and I have another tale to tell. A story from the heart of MedievalLore, of love, power, and destiny. So draw your blanket close, traveler, and listen. The fire has burned low tonight, traveler, but still it glows, a soft, steady light against the chill. Outside, the wind hums through the old stone towers, and if you listen carefully, you might almost hear the echo of another age, when queens wore veils of silk, and love was as dangerous as war. This story begins in Aquitaine, in the warm, wine-scented air of southern France. I was a lady in waiting then, young, quiet, and easily lost in the noise of court. But I remember her clearly, even now. Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine, Queen of France, and unlike any woman the world had seen. She was not soft in manner or speech. Her eyes were bright, her laughter unafraid. She rode horses faster than most knights, spoke Latin as easily as French, and filled her court with poets who sang of love not as duty, but as art. Yet behind her grace lived a restlessness, a loneliness that came from being admired but not understood. Her marriage to King Louis of France had grown cold, bound by piety and distance. And when their union was finally annulled, she returned to her homeland, free again, though the world whispered about her boldness. It was during that journey home that he appeared. Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy, younger than her by nearly a decade, clever, confident, with eyes like stormlight. He came to Aquitaine on political business, though many said his true reason was her. I remember the first time they met, not in a grand hall, but in a courtyard alive with the scent of roses after rain. She stood beneath the balcony, speaking with her advisors, when Henry arrived, his cloak damp from travel. He bowed low, but when he lifted his head, his smile held none of the deference of courtiers. "My lady," he said, "I've crossed a restless sea and half a kingdom to stand before you. I hope your counsel is worth the journey." She laughed, not politely, but with the full warmth of a woman who hadn't laughed in far too long. And in that sound, something shifted. From then on, he came often. Their talks began in public, of alliances, of the English throne, of her lands and his ambitions. But slowly, as evenings lengthened, the tone changed. I would see them walking in the gardens after supper, their words quiet, their hands brushing the lavender as they passed. Sometimes, from the shadows of the corridor, I would hear her voice softened in a way I had never heard before. Not commanding, not queenly, just human. It wasn't long before the court began to whisper again. Some called it scandal. A widow not yet settled, a young duke daring to hope for her hand. But to those of us who watched closely, it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like recognition. Two minds, sharp and equal, finding a rare peace in each other. One evening, after a long day of councils and rain, I carried a letter to her chambers. She sat by the fire, her gown unfastened at the shoulder, her hair loose from its pins, not the image of a queen, but of a woman lost in thought. The letter bore his seal, the Lion of Normandy pressed into red wax. She read it silently, then smiled to herself. When she saw me watching, she said softly, "He speaks of the future as though it were already ours." Within weeks, Henry asked for her hand in marriage. And though it shocked the courts of Europe, Eleanor accepted without hesitation. Their wedding was held quietly, no royal procession, no glittering feast. Only a small chapel in Poitiers and the steady sound of rain upon the roof. She, the most powerful woman in France. He, a young duke destined to be king. When he looked at her that day, I remember thinking that crowns mattered little, that the world, for a moment, bowed to love itself. Soon after, they would cross the Channel to England, where destiny waited to test them both. But for now, for this brief, golden time, they were simply Henry and Eleanor. Two hearts, certain of each other, walking through the gardens of Aquitaine as if eternity had stopped to watch. So rest now, traveler. Let the story pause here, beneath the soft rain and the roses. For even queens and kings must begin, as all do, with one look, one breath, one quiet vow spoken in secret. When Eleanor of Aquitaine crossed into England as Henry's wife, the world took notice. He was barely 21, fierce and ambitious, and within 2 years, he became King Henry II of England. She, already Queen of France once, became queen again, but this time on her own terms. Their union was one of equals, and that frightened many. Together, they ruled more land than any monarch before them, from the grey shores of England to the sunlit valleys of Aquitaine. Courts blossomed with poets and scholars, knights and messengers, all singing the harmony of a realm reborn. And for a time, love held its throne. But kingdoms, like hearts, do not stay still. Henry's power grew heavier, and with it, the distance between them. He ruled with the mind of a conqueror, she with the heart of a poet. And though they still spoke softly at night, the laughter that once filled the corridors became less frequent, like the last notes of a fading song. There were rumors of betrayal, of other women, of arguments behind closed doors. And Eleanor, proud as she was, refused to be silent. When her sons rose against their father, she did not stop them. Perhaps she wanted freedom, or perhaps she wanted him to remember that even queens are not to be caged. Henry, wounded by love and pride, had her imprisoned, not in chains of iron, but in solitude. For 16 long years, she lived apart from him, in a stone fortress that faced the wind. Yet even there, she did not break. She read poetry. She walked among the gardens when allowed. She dreamed of the days when roses and rain had first met in Aquitaine. And then, one spring morning, word came that Henry was gone. The lion had fallen. When they brought her the news, she did not weep, only closed her eyes and whispered, "At last may he rest." In the years that followed, Eleanor lived as a queen mother, wise and gentle, guiding her son Richard the Lionheart. Age softened her voice, but not her spirit. Even as her body grew frail, her mind wandered often to those early days, the laughter in the courtyard, the letters sealed with red wax, the promise of love that once crossed kingdoms. And when her time finally came, she asked to be buried beside Henry, not as a prisoner, not as a queen, but as the woman who once shared his dream. There, in the quiet abbey of Fontevraud, they rest together still. Their tombs lie side by side, his hand forever reaching toward hers, carved in stone. If you ever visit that place, listen closely. The air is still, the candles dim, but you might hear it, the faint echo of a queen's laughter, the soft murmur of forgiveness carried by time. And so ends their story, not in triumph or sorrow, but in peace. For even when love falters, it leaves behind something that does not fade, the memory of having felt deeply, truly, and without fear. So breathe, traveler. Let your thoughts settle like dust on old stone floors. The castles are quiet now, their windows dark, their secrets safe beneath the moon. Somewhere, in the hush between heartbeats, Eleanor still walks the halls of her memory, and love, ancient and enduring, keeps its watch. Sleep well tonight. And if this story brought you peace, stay a while with us. Subscribe to Medieval Lore, where every tale is a candle in the dark, and every night history whispers you to sleep.